Hey, it's Lauren and welcome back to my craft room. Today I'm participating in a YouTube hop. So for those of you who are new and hopped over, welcome to my channel. I hope you find some inspiration here, click subscribe, and have fun along the way on this hop. Our hop is spring themed and I use Lawn Fawn's Dandy Day stamp set and some paper, and I can't wait to show you how my card turned out. Here is my card for the hop. I incorporated also the magic iris die into this card, and there's an LED behind my little dandelion mouse that when it is activated when you open the iris. So in order to keep my video from being about 3 days long, I am going to jump in with my background already distressed and my colored images. Hope you enjoy and learn something new on this video. First thing I want to do is figure out where I'm going to put my LED and where I want it to shine through my background. I need to make sure that I leave enough space where the circle dies or the iris do not interfere with the LED shining through. There's a little hole punch in my mouse dandelion already, so I use my pencil and put a little mark on my distressed background and use a hole punch to make the hole there as well. I also need to know where to put the LED, so I mark my background paper in the same location. Next, I'm going to go a little faster and put together the different pieces of the magic iris die. This takes me a little time because I tend to be extra careful of how my little sausages are placed, and for some reason I just have terrible luck with glue dots. It takes me quite a few to get on those little tiny X marks spots, and I just get overly careful with this part, because if this doesn't work right, then the card won't work right. Next, I'm going to use liquid glue with the rest of my pieces, which I have to be very careful because if liquid glue does get into any of the stitched lines through the die cut piece, it will affect your iris and it can get stuck. It's happened to me before, so I tend to be very extra careful using liquid glue with the iris die pieces. Now that it's all assembled and working properly, I'm going to now look at my placement of the iris so that way I can start putting together my Chibitronic circuit. I want to make sure my little spot for my LED is visible and it lines up and I am not blocking it with my iris die. And I also need to pick a location for my battery. This card is pretty thick, so I want to make sure that nothing has to overlap and that everything has its own clear spot, just to not make the card even thicker. Now I need to figure out which of the sausage little tabs I'm going to use to help with my circuit. Now I want the light to turn on only when the iris is opened, so I need to pick a piece of my iris die that moves to help make the circuit for my Chibitronic LED light up. Now that I know which tab I'm going to use, I fold down the other two of the sausage tabs. That way you can't see them when you're operating the card. I realize I need to move the placement of my battery, so I move that over to the other side. And I trace the little tab of the sausage piece to make sure that I know exactly where my circuit is going to go and where it's going to actually break, so that way the light is not on while the card iris is closed. Now I'm going to take my copper tape and make my circuit. I have one side of my circuit going to where the battery is placed and it will be under the battery, and the other part of my circuit will need to first go through where I'm going to break, and then it will go to the top side of the battery, or the positive side of the battery. It's important to note that when you are using the copper tape, in order to have a nice clean and smooth circuit, you do not want to cut the copper tape and continue. You need to do the folding method of where you fold the tape back, turn it the next direction you want it to go, and to keep going. Cutting the tape will not ensure a smooth circuit. So now I take my lawnfawn tool and I am just smoothing out all the copper tape to make sure everything is good. And my LEDs do have a positive and negative side, so we need to make sure that we follow the positive part of the circuit and that the LED is in the right spot. Otherwise, it also will not work. Now my circuit is complete except for the little break, which I'm now going to put copper tape onto the little sausage tab. Again, I want my circuit to be open when the iris is closed, and the circuit to be closed and connected when the iris is open. That wasn't confusing. Iris open, circuit closed, circuit open, iris closed. I'm putting lots of copper tape on the little sausage tab because I want to make sure there is good connection when I open up the iris and the circuit is now closed. Once I have all the copper tape on the tab, I make sure my iris is still functional and my connection works. I spent a lot of time making sure my placement was correct, that I wasn't blocking anything, and that my connection is really good before gluing the card together. I add some extra tape onto the little circuit because I am worried about my connection. You'll see that a little bit later. I also put a little piece of vellum behind the hole punch of my distressed background to not have such a bright light. The vellum will diffuse the light a little. And now I'm going to finally secure my iris onto the background. I need to make sure that my die pieces are glued securely to the background, otherwise there won't be a strong connection. So I'm actually going to slowly open my iris die and using a pencil mark where the tab will go so I can put glue as close as possible to make sure that the pieces stay as flat as possible. I use liquid glue again because liquid glue has a little bit of forgiveness to make sure that my iris is centered properly onto the background. Making sure to not get any glue where the tabs of the iris need to move, that way it doesn't get stuck. Flip it over and make sure the hole is lined up and that my opener of my iris is also lined up in the appropriate spot. And I was very happy when I opened it that I could see that everything worked properly. Now I'm going to adhere the distressed background to my card, and because the card is thick, we will need to use some type of pop-up dots to adhere the background. I want to make sure my light stays in the card, so I use pop-ups to kind of make a half circle around my LED, and I do have to double stack them due to the thickness. I'm going to also place some pop-ups around the other spots of the card to make sure that my distressed background piece adheres to the whole entire card base. I also want to make sure that I'm not adding any pop-up squares to block any type of movement. Next, I put it all together, and I'm very happy that my circuit still works, my light shines through, and I'm ready to finish putting together the rest of my card. I chose some purple dandelion paper from the Dandy Day paper set, and I also used a really thick 110-pound Nina for my card base because this card is going to be a bit heavy. I want to make sure I have a sturdy card base underneath. I've already cut and colored all my cute little critters and flowers, and I'm still debating on a sentiment and its placement. I decide that the sentiment will not be in the center, and I'm just going to use a little mouse with a dandelion, so I'm going to start putting my card together onto the card base. I am gluing the iris pieces directly to the purple Dandy Day paper, and that will also get glued directly onto the card base. But first I want to glue the inside of my iris, which is the little distressed circle you see there. I glue this piece directly inside, making sure that all of my distress images line up together. I also am making sure that the piece is glued directly onto the purple paper and does not interfere with my iris or my Chibitronic circuit. Once it looks good, I am going to glue in a little mouse that looks like it's blowing on a dandelion, as well as the partial dandelion. My look I was going for was that he was blowing the little dandelion seeds, and that's the little flurry you see when the iris is closed. I didn't want my card to be terribly busy with little critters and flowers, because there is kind of already a lot going on with this card. With the iris and with the LED, I didn't want to take away from the engineering parts of this card, so I kept the little scene small and not have too many images to look at. My favorite part is gluing my little mouse and dandelion just where the LED shines through and make sure my holes line up together and that he is placed exactly where I want him. I'm really excited about this part of my card, and I am really happy with how it turned out. I need a little more on the bottom of the card, so I added another couple mice, and then I'm going to add the flowers to the bottom right of my card. The colors I use to distress my background are freshly cut grass for the grass, and I also did use lawnfawn stencil. For the blue sky, I used mermaid and gradually worked up to fresh lavender, and then the very top of the purple is grape jelly. I've been really inspired by using more pink tones, and I wanted to have purple in my card, as well as the blue sky and green grass. Now that all my stamped and colored images are now on the card, I'm still thinking about what sentiment I want to put on the card. Obviously, it's way too late to stamp anything directly onto the distressed background, so it's going to have to be on a separate piece of paper. But my favorite thing to do is use the banner dies from lawnfawn. And what's great about the sentiments from this set is that they partner perfectly with the banner dies. I'm going to go with the larger sentiment sending wishes, and I'm debating if I should put it towards the bottom or maybe it would look better at the top. Ultimately, I think the bottom is the better place to go because it has a little less busyness with that open grass. I die cut one of the banner pieces, and then I stamp the sentiment in black licorice ink directly onto the banner. Now, even though this card is already very thick, I wanted to pop it up to give it a little bit more dimension of the sentiment against the background. I used some extra small pop-up dots and I glue it onto the bottom of the card, and I always have to make sure it's in the right spot, so I do play around with it a little bit before ultimately making sure it was secured. I'm so happy and excited that this card turned out how I imagined it. It took many tries for me to get this right, and I just love how it lights up. I really hope you like it as much as I do. Thanks again for watching my video. Head down to my description below to see who to hop on over to next.